Hey guys, Scripture here with another video, and I want to talk about the Charlie Rose interview. I wanted to rewatch it, and I've noticed some stuff that I think most Star Wars fans would be interested in hearing, particularly those of us that are very disappointed with the direction that Disney and Kathleen Kennedy took Star Wars, because there's so much conflicting information about who's responsible for what, and how did George Lucas feel about this, and what really went on. And there's some little tidbits in this interview that I think sometimes have been overlooked. So I thought we'd take a listen and let's talk about it.
I had made a decision to move ahead on the next Star Wars series, and we were starting to do that.
So you were starting to make the next Star Wars.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very important. A lot of times when I'm discussing what went on with Disney and George and his sequels, oftentimes people kind of brush it off like, oh, well, he hadn't done anything, it was just these little jot notes, or, oh, it was on a cocktail napkin, he didn't really have anything going, and he didn't know, or he hadn't established what he was going to do. So the idea that Disney stabbed him in the back, I mean, come on, that's not real. He was working on them. He was working on the sequels before he sold. And he goes on.
You as director, filmmaker.
So, and we were working with a writer. It wasn't quite working out.
So they were working with a writer. It wasn't working out, but they were working with a writer to create scripts. Now, when that happens, that's going to be those scripts. What he's talking about is the scripts. So the more detailed, scene by scene, line by line scripts. But those scripts are based on something. There's an outline, and then you write the script. So he had already created his outlines. Okay, they were sitting there. And that means, your main characters, your storyline, what's going to happen in general. And also, in an outline or treatment, there would also be some level of details about, the character arcs. Not in depth, like I said, scene by scene, but there would be an established, okay, this character, this happens to them, and they end up, and this happens to them, and this happens to them, and they end up here. He had that already laid out, and then he had a writer trying to fill in the gaps and trying to help him to expand on the script. And that's why when George Lucas was talking to J.J. Abrams in whatever that was, that show, what does he say to him? He says, JJ, what happened to Darth Vader's grandchildren? Children, as in plural. And JJ said, oh, I don't know, whatever, blah, blah.
JJ, what happened to Darth Vader's grandchildren?
Oh, George. This is great. You tell me, man. You made all this shit up.
That would have been in the treatments. Like, those characters would have been in the treatments, and sort of the basic premise of what they were going to do would have been in those treatments. It's not as if the treatments were literally like 3 sentences on a cocktail napkin, guys. But that's the argument I get from a lot of people. And it's in defense of Disney for squashing them. But that's not the case. And if he was working with a writer on a script, there would have been, even though he says it wasn't working out well, surely there would have been at least some details ironed out. Maybe it was a small percentage, but even then. So it even went beyond just the treatment level and the outline level. There was a certain amount, we don't know how much, but a certain amount of actual script that had been worked on and maybe had been established.
But I was also, stepping away a little bit and turning things over to Kathleen Kennedy. And so what happened was Disney said, Bob Iger said, if you really want to sell your company, if you're thinking about selling it, because we were talking about retirement and what are you going to do after all this kind of stuff. And he said, well, if you really want to sell it, we're very interested.
This is where it gets really important too. So there's the story outlines plus a certain amount of script being done. So it's not as if he had no thoughts in his head about sequels. I also wanted to just, before we move on to this, because this is huge with Kathleen Kennedy, is also mention that those treatments would have been different than what we got from his sequel scripts that whatever leaked or were exposed about with like Darth Maul and Talon and all that stuff. Those were done before Maul is killed in Rebels. So when George Lucas made those scripts, he agreed with Filoni in bringing back Darth Maul. I don't like it, whatever. But that he had agreed on that. But then Filoni, who's his protege, and if he is his protege, you would think he would have had at least some semblance of information about what he planned on doing with the sequels, because this was before the sale to Disney, which led to Filoni killing off Maul officially, finally, in Rebels. So whatever George was working on that he submitted to Disney would not have had Darth Maul as the main villain. He would have had to have pivoted because his protege who loves him, Dave Filoni, killed Darth Maul. Okay, so now the next thing here, and this is huge. So he was already in the process of turning over Lucasfilm to Kathleen Kennedy. That's a really important thing to note if you didn't know that. So he chose Kathleen Kennedy. I'm not saying that Disney wouldn't have chosen her because she has a very long list of executive and producer credits in some major stuff, whether it's involving Spielberg or Lucas or others. She's been in the biggest IPs. Now, I think what Disney did was allow her to get a little more involved with the creative, which is a huge mistake. But George Lucas chose her. He thought she was going to be the one. And my question, and I think this is the big question, because we've all attacked Kennedy. We all can't stand Kennedy. I get it. All of it justified. However, I will say this. I do wonder, being that he was transitioning some of his responsibilities and the company over to Kathleen Kennedy, who he's known for decades and worked with for decades, would she have followed what he wanted to do with the sequels? Well, of course she would have if he still owned the company. She's still working for him. The question is, would she have been good with doing George's story treatments? If, you know what I mean? Like, is it possible that Disney said, no, we're going off in a different direction than what George submitted, and she basically was hired and said, okay, but she would have been pro George's treatments? What I'm saying is that, is it all Kathleen Kennedy's fault that the sequels were what they chose to do, what Disney chose to do? Was it all because of her? Or was she perfectly fine doing the stuff George had been working on, that she was, around him and he was transferring some of the responsibilities of certain things to her? We don't know to what extent that was, but would she been perfectly fine with following the outlines and the whatever amount of script was done that George had been working on? Right? And I say that because we kind of jump on Kathleen Kennedy justifiably with a lot of things. Listen, I've criticized her as much as anybody. I am not sitting here letting Kathleen Kennedy off the hook. That's not the point of this video. My point is, a lot of times people don't understand or give credence to the fact that some of this stuff is coming directly from corporate, directly from Disney. And we don't know exactly how much that is. Kathleen Kennedy can't stand up as the president of Lucasfilm and say, Disney isn't doing what I wanted. No, she works for them. you don't poop where you eat. So all I'm saying is we don't know exactly how that all transpired behind the scenes. We don't. What we do know, though, is that Kathleen Kennedy's been involved with multiple other projects and approved a lot of stuff that I think she knows full well George wouldn't have anything to do with. And I think it's either because keep my job, or there's contractual issues if she leaves or whatever. There's probably some sort of contractual issue. Or, quite frankly, she was for that. And she is one of these people that took what he did and is running with it and trying to make it her own. We do know that she's been more involved with the creative. So I think the overall thing is that it's nuanced. There's details, and just saying that she's the reason for all of these problems isn't totally accurate. It's definitely accurate to a degree, but again, George Lucas chose her, just like he chose Filoni. He was bad at choosing people. He's not a very good. I don't think he reads people super well.
And I had the story treatments or outlines, and we were working on scripts, and so I sold it.
This is important to understand too. So he had the outlines, and they were working on scripts, outlines, and scripts plural. So he had the outlines for the sequels. And the only reason I thought I'd comment on this is because if the outlines were just nothing, and they were just a few jot notes on a cocktail napkin, then how would you be able to do 8 and 9? How would you be able to do an outline for 8 and an outline for 9 if you didn't have details about anything in the outline for 8? You would have to. You would have to at least have enough details that you can say, okay, this is where it starts, this is where it ends, this is what happens to the characters. Episode 8, okay, this is where we are, this is where they go, episode 9 and onward, right? You'd have to. So there was more to it than just this sort of minute, inconsequential thing that he handed over to Disney.
They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. And make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships, with different, to make it new.
So are you at peace with this?
Yeah.
As much as you can be.
That's an interesting one too, and that kind of dovetails what I said earlier about them kind of going off and doing what they wanted, and that he wouldn't have approved of it. I don't think George is going back to Tatooine 15 times if he still runs Lucasfilm. Right? Like he just said, new. I just don't think he would have done things the way they did it with going back to the same things. Like he says, it's a retroactive trilogy or retroactive stories where they're just rehashing stuff and changing it and trying to trick the audience. That's essentially what they've done. But I think it's pretty clear that's not what he wanted. And I'm still so interested in finding out what, to the extent that they got to with the scripts and to what the outlines said. The only thing I can know for sure is that it would have involved Anakin Skywalker's grandchildren. And I think he definitely would have went with Han and Leia having at least a couple kids. I don't think Luke would have a kid. He's made that very clear. Palpatine's dead. Luke doesn't get married and have kids. But I think he was definitely very for Han and Leia having kids and having stories involving them. Not one kid, but kids. And like I've said a million times, at the end of TFA, as disappointed as I was with some things, I was like, oh, but you know what, though? They're going to reveal that this is actually Han and Leia's daughter, and so we've got the daughter and the son and the sibling rivalry and all the cool stuff that would go with it. No!
They decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to... They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway, but at the same time, I said, I'm not going to... If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble, because they're not going to do what I want them to do. So, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all I would do is muck everything up.
And there it is. So, I mean, what more can you say? He knew they were going to do something different. This is interesting too because in my other video about Georgia a few videos ago, whatever, 3 days ago, whatever, sitting down for this interview, like it came out on the 25th of December, but it was probably filmed before that. But I think he was in the loop. I think he knew what they were doing the whole time and was not thrilled about it. And he says they weren't going to do what I wanted them to do. So a lot of people that are like, oh, this is, George had Luke on an island. Yeah, okay, but he didn't have him on the island for the same reasons. That's the key. It's not that he's on an island. That's not the issue at all. The issue is why he was on the island and what he thought about the Jedi and all that stuff, which George definitely would have disagreed with. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that he would have disagreed with that. You could have put him on the island for any number of reasons that didn't involve hating the Jedi. Like, it's stupid.
You got to live with it, and people are going to talk about it and all that kind of stuff. It's like talking about your divorce or something. It's awkward, but it's not painful.
Okay, so now he finishes there talking about, Charlie Rose asks him about, it's your babies and this and that, and he's saying, it's not painful, but it's awkward that people are talking about the divorce, right? The him selling to Disney. And I think he's right. I mean, it's not up to him to feel guilty to fans for what these idiots did. It's not. And I mean he's dealt with a lot of criticism over the years as well. It's not up to him to apologize or feel bad for selling to Disney. It's Disney's fault for what they did. Having said that, I have said in other videos as well, and I still hold this opinion, that he could have just held on to it. He says also in this interview that, he wouldn't be able to stay away, and he'd be hovering over the director, and he just wouldn't be able to do it. So he had to sell to go do the other stuff he was going to do. He wanted to do other things. He says in this interview, I wanted to do my other movies and do other things, and it was going to take 10 years to make another trilogy, and I didn't know if I'd be alive at 80 years old. Okay, all those are fair. But I don't think he needed to sell. I think he could have brought on Kathleen Kennedy, he could have brought on J.J. Abrams, he could have brought on all these guys that he was pro them being involved. He could have done that and overseen, I can't control myself, I have to be there, while they're making it. Nah, no you don't. We have cell phones, we have FaceTimes. It's not like the 70s, right? Like, you can be very involved without really being involved, like without being there, right? I mean, how many businesses now post-COVID are doing like Zoom meetings and all these things? Corporations do it all the time. You don't have to physically be there. You can have a chit chat or whatever. So I'm still disappointed he sold. Obviously, I think we all are. I don't feel like he had to, but he did feel like he had to. And it is what it is. And he trusted them, and Bob Iger even said that he trusted him with his story treatments and his outlines and whatever else he had gotten done. And he basically told them, we're not doing that. We're doing this sort of retroactive version of the OT, which sucked, and we all hate it. So there you go, guys. So all that to say, there's the internet loves to kind of all or nothing with issues, whether it's Kathleen Kennedy and her involvement, whether it's George Lucas's sequels, whether it's how Disney dealt with things, how they treated George, yada, 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 all those things. So I wanted to make this video because it's like, think, use logic. Instead of just saying it's this or it's that, there's more nuance. There's nuance in business, there's nuance with human beings. It's not as cut and dry as George got backstabbed by everybody, blah, 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 blah. It's not that cut and dry. He did, to an extent, but it's not that cut and dry. There's more to it, too. He chose Kathy. He chose to sell. There's all these other issues. So, just taking a step back and just kind of looking at the whole picture rather than just sort of cherry-picking this and that I'm upset about is a better way to go about it. But either way, you guys let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Always helps the channel. And YouTube has changed the algorithm. So the more likes you get now, it impacts your video even more. So feel free to do that. And anyways, feel free to check anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.